Go back to how you guys, like you and Sandy, got integrated into the church.
Okay.
And how that led to, your decision for adoption.
Yeah, God clearly had things planned out well ahead of time. And only after the fact, looking back, can I see how God had set everything up. It all kind of started when Sandy and I moved to Lloydminster. I was running the locksmith business, brand new at it, just trying to figure out how to be a boss and run a business. And part of that is hiring people. And one time I had an ad in the newspaper and was looking to hire somebody to expand the business because things were going well. And I thought it was all my doing. So I was very proud with how things were going. And this guy just came into the shop and left a resume, said he had seen the ad and new to town, just moved to town, and this is like the first or second place he stopped at to drop a resume off. And so I hired this guy named Sean. He seemed like a good guy, and I could just tell he was this guy I wanted to hire. He'd be a good worker. I hired him, he started right away. I could just tell things were a little bit different about him. Being from a Christian background, I can kind of sense people that are Christians, and I knew there was something different about him, and I knew it's because he was a Christian. So when he told me, hey, I'm a Christian, I was like, yeah, I know, I can tell. Didn't know for sure you're a Christian, but you're not like everybody else. So so we kind of became friends. He mentioned, or he brought it up a few times where when I told him I was from a Christian home and was a Christian at one time, but didn't really want anything to do with it or to talk about it or whatever, because I wasn't Christians are those people and I'm not one of those people, just from stuff in the past. He kind of left it alone and was very understanding about that and didn't push, which was good, but continued to be my friend, and didn't let my distaste for his belief system sour things. So he just kept being Sean and just kept being a good person. Sandy and I became friends with Sean and his wife Linnea, and over the next, that would have been 2010, so over the next few years we developed a friendship. Never hung out tons, but whenever we would get together for dinner or play board games or whatever, it was always we had always be friends, and it was just, you could pick up the conversation, no problem, and it was just awesome. I can't remember when it happened, but they mentioned that they were planning on growing their family through adoption. And that was, that was interesting for me to hear, because I never really considered adoption that normal people do. Most people get married, have kids, and that's that. They grow their family that way. But they said that they had decided to grow their family through adoption. So I thought that was really interesting, because it wasn't like they had to go to adoption because of other issues, but that was, that's how they were just going to do it. And I realize now that people are called to adopt. That's a burden that's placed on people's hearts. And I get that now, but back then I was just oh, that's interesting, that is different.
Yeah.
And that kind of just put a little, that planted something in us where we would think about it and talk about it once in a while and consider it, but not really consider it.
Yeah.
They told us that they had been matched with a birth mother, and that she was due to have a baby in the next few months, and that was that. And then I remember it was November, found out that they got the call and they were headed to the States to adopt their baby girl, and it was oh, that's cool. And we couldn't wait to meet her. And we had to wait a little bit. We got to meet Lucy, and as soon as we met Lucy, it was something that was sort of bugging us became a priority. It went from just something we thought about to something we had to pursue. It was in November 2013 that Sandy and I took a course on international adoption. I remember it well because we had to drive to Edmonton through a blizzard. We still weren't sure if we wanted to do it, but we'd go take this course and see what it was about and learn a bit more about it before deciding to pursue it further. But yeah, I remember like doing this and then deciding, yeah, we could do it. And still like God was well out of the picture. And then we started talking about like, about parenting styles and about our childhoods and stuff like that. And we realized that a lot of the values and morals and stuff that my parents taught me and that were valuable, no matter like my beliefs aside. There was a lot of good in my childhood, because at that point I was still kind of bitter about a few things. So just decided that, yeah, this is something we want to have. Like we want to use the Christian values and we want our children to have that. But we can't really give them that unless we go to church. Mm-hmm. But some stuff happened with the church in the start of 2014. And we ended up, Sean and Linnea invited us one Sunday. And I just remember saying like, yeah, like that was like the one time I didn't fight it. I was just like, yeah, I'll go. I told Sandy, I was like, if this is the church and these are the Christians that I remember Christians being, like, I'm out the door and like, I just don't need that. We went to church in like March of 2014, somewhere around there, and remember walking into the church and something was different about First Baptist Church in Lloyd. The people that greeted us and we were introduced to by Sean and Linnea were just awesome. They were genuine. They wanted to get to know us, and it wasn't just because we were a new face and that's what they had to do is just say hi. They saw that Sean and Linnea they were with us and we were their friends and went out of the way to like just welcome us. Over the next few months, a lot of the stuff that was said at church just broke me down in terms of arguments against God. And yeah, that ties into the story of Lucas, because at that point I had to open the door to God and I couldn't put up any more objections or arguments against him because of the things I had been learning. I was finding answers for objections that I had in the past to discount Christianity. I just remember there was one Sunday where Pastor Mark gave his sermon and did like one of the only altar calls that he really did. That wasn't something that they did every week, even though like the gospel message is preached regularly and consistently. This was like a notable one where it's like, hey, if you're not Christian, like if you haven't given your life to God, we need to do something about that. And being the super introverted and scared person I was, I didn't like respond by raising my hand or going to the front or whatever it was. But I definitely had a conversation with God at that point. It was one of the most real experiences I've had with God. I just remember during the prayer time sitting there and God sort of like knocking on the door of my mind and being like, I understand, like I've made you a certain way and I've built you so you just don't believe things without understanding them first, and I get that. But at this point, you have no more valid excuses to not give me a shot I just need you to demonstrate that you're honest in your pursuit of truth, and I need you to just open the door and let me in, and we'll just eventually just remove all the bricks and the wall will be gone. And I had no reason to object to that, so I just relented and said, okay, I'm not going to be a blind faith type of person. I'm not just gonna, I need to have answers for what I believe. If what is happening now is real and you are who you say you are, I'm gonna hold you to that. And yeah, that was kind of the moment that things changed. And that started me on a journey just learning more about God and who He is. I wanted a relationship that was genuine. It was all or nothing. It wasn't going to be 1 foot in and 1 foot out.
Yeah.
It wasn't going to be lukewarm. I didn't want Sunday Christianity. I wanted the life change that offered. And the same day, Sandy gave her life to God. And that was the start of a new chapter. Everything changed that day. God sent me on a path. He gave me a desire to learn. Yeah, to just have answers. Because before, when I was younger and somebody asked me, well, why are you a Christian? Or what's that about? I wasn't really able to offer a good solid answer or reason for the things that I believed. I learned that you're not a bad Christian because you have doubts or questions about stuff.
Yeah.
Doubt and questions are a biblical thing. And God has made us in a way that, like, our minds are designed so we wonder about things and we have questions. And the great thing is that He puts us all in community and we get to know people and develop relationships with people where we get to learn from each other.
Yeah.
And learn from other people, scholars, authors. Yeah, so it's pretty awesome how that worked out. Now, I guess to fast forward a little bit, we completed all our paperwork. Took like a year to do. We had like applications, so we just decided because Sean and Linnea, we kind of just copied what they did. We applied and we sort of decided on Florida without really, like, at the international course, we learned about some other options in countries and decided that for a few different reasons, Florida would sort of, or the United States and Florida would be a good place to try. And after we had the whole God encounter at church and we had changed our lives, we began to sort of question whether Florida was really what God wanted us to do. Something I prayed about and still pray about now is like just acknowledging that God is greater than I am, and just surrendering my plans and hopes to Him for that sort of thing. I feel like God has sort of changed the way I think, so my hopes and dreams are more in line with what God wants from us. This was something I sort of surrendered and said, we have decided on doing this and we're pursuing this. If this is not what you want, you need to like stop that and point us in the direction you want us to go. And we just didn't really hear anything about it from God, like specifically, like if you want us to go and adopt from some place specific, you need to make it obvious. But in the meantime, we feel like the desire to be parents and to adopt is something you have placed on our hearts, and we're just going to pursue that. And if this is something that you don't want us to do, you need to act on that. But in the meantime, we're just gonna keep going. And as long as you don't show us otherwise, we don't feel or see any reason to not do this. So that's just what we did. We just kept pursuing Florida and adoption and started to get excited about the idea of being parents. We kept doing the paperwork process for adopting through Florida, dealing with agency in Alberta, dealing with one in Florida, working with the government to complete all the paperwork that we had to do, and then doing like a home study and stuff, and like that. All the paperwork was finally done in like September of 2014. I think September 1st or something was like the date we were officially like on the list and ready to go. At that point, it was out of our hands. And up until that point, everything that we had to do on this journey was like, it was on us. We had to fill this out and get this done. We had to meet with this person and deal with this issue, and then that's done. But at this point, there was nothing else we could do other than just trust God. And that was unusual for us. So it began a process of waiting, and at first it was praying about just giving us a child, and we want to be parents and pursuing that. It was November 5th, 2015, so we had been waiting for like 14 months. Yeah. And no word on anything. Like there's just no movement. Well, before that, in the time, we would go through phases, both Sandy and I, where it was up and down as to how we were doing, patience-wise. And I joke about it now, but I still think it's a good thing to pray for. But I joke, just be aware of what you're praying for, because we're both praying for patience. And now I realize somewhat ironically that God just doesn't make you a patient person.
Yeah.
He gives you opportunities to become a patient person by demonstrating patience. So I kind of joke like stupid me for praying for that, because that was like the 14 months, is just learning to be patient. In my experience, God has worked the most when I have realized and come to the point where I can't do it anymore. So November 5th was one of those days where I couldn't take it anymore. And I was just done waiting. I hit a wall and I just couldn't do it anymore. It was a Thursday. I remember just being in the shower, getting ready for work. And in the shower, I've told this to a bunch of people, but the shower in the morning is like my time to just be with God. I get in the shower and just pray, and it's like, it's me and God in some hot water. And it's a good way to start the day for me. But I remember I was just off. I just couldn't take it anymore that day. And just standing there, and I was just broken. I just couldn't do it. And I just remember crying out to God and saying, this whole time, this whole wait, we've been praying and being patient and trying to be awesome, because we knew that you had us covered and we could trust you. But at this point, I don't know. So yeah, I just broke, and like literally cried out to God that He had to do it. He had to help, and like I was just done. I had nothing else. I had run out of patience. Run out of the ability to just put it to the back of my mind and not think about it, and just pray the good prayer about being patient and trusting God. And yeah, I didn't have any answer from God. No sign, like everything's gonna be okay. And yeah, that November 5th sucked. Like, it was a hard day. And it's funny, like I went to work, had like the crappiest day ever. Felt like anything that could go wrong did go wrong, and I just was not myself, and it just sucked, like just a terrible day. And all I could think about was getting home, and a lot of times, well, not a lot of times, but sometimes I sit at work and just like think about what I want to make for dinner. Because cooking is just something I love doing. I was just like, we're doing steak tonight. Steak and mashed potatoes and carrots, and like I'm gonna, it was all I could do to like just finish out the day and get home and just get in the kitchen and just relax and forget about waiting and hearing nothing from God, and still not being a parent, and all the suckiness in my life. So it's funny, like I got home, and even while I was upset about things, God still had changed me to the point where I'm listening to like podcasts about who knows what. While I'm cooking, I'm like listening to things, and yeah, I don't know what I was listening to, but I finished up one episode and I went back to my phone on the counter to turn on another one, and noticed that I had an alert and the phone was blinking. So pick it up and look, and it wasn't just a text message or something. I had a voicemail. I was like, well, that's odd. So I checked the voicemail, and yeah, it was a lady from the adoption agency in Calgary. For the first few months when we were waiting for the call about a child or something, we had our phones on us all the time and ringers turned on and stuff. And I was to the point where like I'd leave my phone in the other room and it'd be on vibrate and whatever, and my phone was on the counter. Yeah, it was a lady from the adoption agency in Calgary calling, and right away I was just like, this is crazy. Like, here I am so wrapped up in myself and my struggle and poor me. And I finally get to the point where I have to trust God. And yeah, I get a phone call from the adoption agency in Calgary saying they have a match for us. Yeah, it was literally like hours after I had prayed to God about it. He let me struggle a little bit more, and then boom, he stepped in and he picked me up when I couldn't go on, and he moved me forward. And it was just incredible how God had answered my prayer. Up until that point, I was still operating. I still had some nagging doubt in my mind about God and who he was, and then he stepped in and he picked me up, and he proved like this is me, and this is like, yeah, I got you. Yeah, we got matched with a pregnant lady in Florida. She was due to have, we got matched pretty early on, and she was not due to have the baby until April 7th, 2015, 2016, because it was 2015 we got the match. Like, it was a long time, and I sort of checked out at times where it was just like, didn't think about it, because I just, waiting sucked. We were excited, but still kind of selfish about things, and we began praying. Like right away, we were praying for the birth mother and our child that she was carrying, and praying for the health of our child and the safety of our child. And very much convinced that this was a child that God had in mind for us, and we were just so pumped. But it was still a long ways off, so we still had to wait again. But this time there was an end date to this waiting period. Like, the baby was gonna come, so we just had to wait a little bit longer. January, that things sort of changed, and I remembered the prayer that I had been praying about God's will and not mine, and praying tough prayers, and I began to change my thinking and really consider what God wanted for us. If my plans and will come against God's, I lose.
Yeah.
So I might as well just get that out of the way. So I began to pray and ask God that if this is the child that He wants for us, that He make it happen. Otherwise, just make it go away. And yeah, so that was a few months of praying stuff like that, and just seeking God's will and purpose for that in our lives, and came to the point where, in reality, I think it's absolutely the most important thing you could do is pray that God adjust your will and desires to help you match His and move forward. March 2016, it was like the 15th, I think was the date, a Wednesday. We had been dealing with the birth mother counselor at our agency in Florida, and things were starting to be a little bit strange with the birth mother, and that's the day we learned that she had given birth to her baby girl, the one that we had prayed about, and that was going to be our baby girl. And yeah, she gave birth and made the decision to parent her, and that it was done. We weren't going to be parents, and that was absolutely devastating. Just crushed us. It was like noon on a Wednesday, and noon on Wednesdays we started to become a thing. And yeah, it sucked. Both Sandy and I went home from work and just went and lay in bed and just cried. It was like the worst thing ever. To have the day before the hope and the anticipation to become parents, and then the next day not. And to not know why. But to just know that this was something that I had prayed about, and ask God that if this was something that He didn't want for us, to not let it happen. It took us a few days to get over that. Not get over that, but to be okay with it. And I just have to say that everything that we felt was personal, and we were really happy. We were happy for the birth mother. We were happy that her baby girl was going to grow up in her family and be raised by her mother. And we were happy for her and happy for her child, and glad not necessarily in those few days, but we were glad that we were able to play a role in their lives. Yeah. And hopefully, we don't know the extent of the situation and her story, but we'd like to think that God used us for a purpose and placed us in her life and her daughter's life to provide for her and give her baby a better start to life than she might have had otherwise. But that doesn't get around the fact that we were not parents still, and now we'd have to wait again, and it crushed us. If it wasn't for God and the support system that he had built around us with our friends and church family, if it wasn't for the people and relationships we had around us, we wouldn't have made it. We needed to get away, and we needed to just forget about things for a while. So we ended up taking a trip to Hawaii, going to our happy place where we had our honeymoon and forget about life. We had set aside funds for our beach vacation in Florida, so we used it for a beach vacation, not in Florida. Now looking back, I realized that I hadn't surrendered that part of us to God to provide, and I was still trying to hang on and do things.
Yeah.
So we were setting aside money so we could financially support ourselves through the adoption that we wanted, and take our trip and live in the States for a while until we could come home with our child. And didn't really consider God in that part of our lives. So we decided to go to Hawaii, and we spent our travel fund and that, and then came back from that, and we had to go back to work and back to our lives. It was really tough the next couple months, just dealing with the emotion of not being parents. There was things like Mother's Day and Father's Day, and that was terrible. We had gone through all those in the waiting process of not knowing, and it was a struggle to get through that. We kind of got to a point where we were down about things and angry at God, and just struggling. It was kind of bipolar the way we dealt with it. Like we were struggling, or at least I was struggling with God and upset about things, but still on the other hand, turning to God and seeking his will, because ultimately we knew that God had a plan for us, and I didn't waver in that trust, but I was angry about things, but still didn't hear anything about it. And in the meantime, we got kind of a little bit jaded with the thought and idea of becoming parents. That sort of just faded and was disappointing. It came time for Pleasant View Bible Camp to start up, and Ryan had asked me to be a volunteer, or asked me to come be a leader at camp, and I had said no, because what if we get a phone call and I'll need that time, that vacation time to go and be a parent. And finally he wore me down to the point where I was just like, okay, fine, I'll do it. But if something comes up, I'm out, and you're not gonna hold that against me. And I remember going to staff training right at the start of July. And I just got to the point where in my morning devotional time, I was just done dealing with not hearing anything from God. There was silence and no answers, nothing. And I just got to one of those points like November 5th where I just couldn't handle it anymore. And I'm reading, I can't even remember what I was reading in the Bible, because I was following along the GRIP plan, but it was like all these times where people were trusting God and he came through, trusting God, and God, his promises, he kept them. And here I was, and I felt like I didn't have that. God wasn't telling me what I needed to do in life. And here I was at a Bible camp about to start senior high and be a leader, and I was struggling. And then I remember praying to God and breaking down again and acknowledging that I couldn't do it. I just couldn't wait, and I couldn't handle not hearing from him, and I couldn't handle the silence. And then we do breakfast, and we start in with the chapel session at the staff training, and instead of somebody getting up and talking and giving a sermon or whatever, Kenton puts on a series by Andy Stanley called In the Meantime. It's ironic how God works, because whether or not God had this planned out or whether it was just a coincidence that Kenton picked this series, but in the first part of In the Meantime, Andy Stanley talks about silence from God and not hearing anything and waiting. And I was just like, this is unbelievable, because I literally just prayed about this and was angry at you about this, and now here you are telling me, like, I understand that you're waiting. I understand that you're in pain, but I need you to just hang on. Because that was the theme of camp, is hold on and just wait, because he had a plan. Camp started, and camp was awesome. It was a challenge, but it was awesome. But at camp, the speaker that week was Vin Doan. Got to know Vin over that week. I think he sensed that, probably because I was bugging him all week, but he could tell that something was going on, and he offered me friendship when I needed it. Going through camp, the Monday though, around dinner time, I got a message that Sandy had called the camp. I had to call her right away because it was important. So a few hours later, I got the message.
Of course.
Yeah. So I called her, and she was excited. She had received an email from our agency in Alberta that there was sort of an emergency sort of adoption thing happening. A pregnant mother had gone into their agency and, like, sort of last minute in her pregnancy, and wanted to set up an adoption plan for her child. But they said straight up, like, this, she seems not sure about things, so this probably won't happen. Like, don't get your hopes up. So we didn't get our hopes up, but immediately Sandy, she didn't even wait to hear back from me. She just replied and said, yeah, we're in, whatever you need. If this is the child, like, not in an email, but, like, immediately started praying, like, if this is the child that you want for us, God, make it happen. Yeah, so she told me that, and I was pumped. All day the next day and Wednesday, just praying about, God, if this is the child you want for us, make it happen. Otherwise, make it go away. Don't drag it out. Don't prolong this. We, like, either yes or no. So Wednesday at, like, dinner, received a message that Sandy had called again around noontime. That she had, yeah, that Wednesday at noon, Sandy had got an email saying things went the direction that the agency had thought, and the mother was going to parent her child. And again, like, crushed. Just, like, we were personally devastated again. Even though we had not gotten our hopes up, we were still crushed about things, but happy that a child was going to grow up in Plan A, and that's the family, and we're happy for them. But on the, like, personally, Sandy and I were upset, and it brought back all the hurt and disappointment and loss that we had felt. That Wednesday, Sandy came out for chapel, and we just sat, like, the back row and just cried the entire time. Yeah, like, looking back, I kind of feel bad that Sandy went through that by herself, and I wasn't there for her. But at the time, it kind of seemed like it was hitting me a little bit harder. And yeah, I was just surrounded with friends and people that were there for me at camp, and camp was so intense that it was a distraction. I had some tough conversations with people at camp the next day or two, and one of them was Vin, and the next day, sat down with Vin in the afternoon, and he was gracious enough to let me just dump my life on him. He just listened for several hours, me telling the story, and then just eventually got to the end, and he's just like, wow, that sucks. He sympathized with me and was not able to answer me a solution to my problem. Well, he did encourage me in turning to God and leaning on God in that and trusting God. He just asked me, when something else happens in this, just let me know. I'd love to hear more of the story when there's more to tell. And I was like, okay, deal. We moved on. We rebounded fairly quickly after that little adoption thing the week before. And then Wednesday at noon, Sandy got an email, got a phone call at work about another match. We received a proposal from our agency in Florida that they had another placement for us, but this wasn't a mom that was pregnant. It was like a baby that was born and waiting and needed a family. And we were immediately excited but cautious. We wanted to receive the paperwork and go over like whatever medical information was there and make an informed decision and be adults about it. We had lost some money in the very first match we had and didn't know if we could financially do it. Received the paperwork shortly after and started going over it, and there wasn't a whole lot of medical stuff, which was different than our first match. All we knew is that this child that needed a family was in the hospital in Round Rock, Texas, which was bizarre because our agency is Florida, and you only deal with that in one state. That's about all we knew, and the hospital wasn't really releasing any information. We didn't have the ability to make like an educated decision about things, so we weren't sure. We wanted to meet with a doctor and go over whatever limited paperwork there was. Both pediatricians that our agency had recommended that deal with adoption specifically were out of town and weren't able to like sort of meet with them over the phone about this proposal. We met with a local doctor who he scared us a little bit because he looked at the stuff on there and was laying out a bit of a horror story, his concerns about some possible stuff, and that got us feeling a little bit scared about things. But then the other doctor that we intended to see came in the room partway through and walked in the room. We had like a file on this birth mother and some like previous pregnancies and a couple hospital visits to do with this baby, and he kind of just like walked in and pushed it aside and sat down on the table and was kind of like, just straight up asked us. He's like, "Are you in this? Like, what is your purpose with this adoption, with this child? Do you have kids already, and you're looking for a child to fit in with your family and be like a perfect fit for your family, or do you just have a home and are just loving people and just want to have a child and will love it no matter what this child is?" And we're like, well, obviously the second one, like the second one. So he's like, well, then it doesn't matter what this file does or does not say. There's so many resources that we have in Canada and specifically in our area that no matter what hypothetical condition or difficulty this child might or might not have at some point in its life, all it needs Like the best thing you can give a child is a loving home, and you just answered my question, so what's the problem? So that was the morning on Friday. And we went from there, we went to the church. Like we were freaking out because this happened. Like the baby is down there in the hospital, set to be released Friday.
So this was just over a week after.
It was literally 1 week after that thing that happened at camp fell through. Like literally 1 week to the hour. We got another match, and we had to be in Texas like ASAP. So Friday after meeting with the doctor, we went to the church and talked to Darren, and like we needed prayer because we were freaking out financially if we had enough resources to pull together to just pay for stuff. Kind of went to Darren and dumped it on him, and it was kind of like, if anybody can help prayer-wise about this, we need help now. And he was like, well, I'm on it. I'm on it. I'll help however I can. And we realized that we had enough to cover adoption expenses, like the costs of the agencies and lawyers and stuff, but we didn't have enough to live in Florida for like an unknown period of time because this child is in the hospital. And we had to go from Texas to Florida to just start the paperwork process for the adoption. Like it doesn't start until you get to Florida. And so we didn't know how long we were going to be in Texas. And then while we were at the church with Darren, we got an email from an agency in Florida saying that our criminal record check and our child intervention or welfare check had expired. And we talked about it like Wednesday night, and we're like, there's no way they would give us a proposal knowing that these had expired. They would advise us because these take time to get completed. And we were still praying on Friday and weren't sure, like, do we take this leap and go somewhere without money to live there? And then we found out like this stuff is expired. We went to the social services office because it was like just after 12, and got down there like 20 after 12, and they closed for lunch between 12 and 1. And we walked up and we were just like, oh, they're probably closed. Open the door and walk in on their lunch break, and go up to the counter, and this lady was working there, and she wasn't super happy that they forgot to lock the door and we walked in on their lunch break. She gave us the forms and then said, well, it's gonna be, like, it takes a few days to get this back. And we laid out the thing where there's like, there's a child waiting in the States and we gotta get down there like right away. And she's like, okay, well, come back in an hour. We went from there, we went to the police station, filled out the paperwork and begged and pleaded with them as well. And they're just like, okay, we'll come back in an hour. So we did that, went back to social services, picked up that completed form. It was done within an hour. Went back to the police station. We had both completed within an hour. And that was an obstacle that we were just like, there's no way we're gonna be able to go. Like, we're gonna have to, the baby's gonna have to go into like foster care or something. So we were kind of stressed about that, and bam, like 2 things right away. Done, not a problem. Then our agency emailed us from Florida and was like, you need to get these contracts to do with the adoption signed and notarized. Like, great. This is Friday afternoon. So we called up our lawyer and he's like, yeah, no problem, come right down. And we had everything done on Friday by like 3:30. So at that point our minds were set at ease, like, this is out of our control. God has us covered. We don't have to worry about details like this. So we went home and got a hold of Neil and asked him to see if he wanted to drive us to the airport. Neil, being Neil, said, yeah, no problem, whenever you need to go. So I said, okay, perfect, we'll book a flight, and called him a little bit later and told him we need a ride to the airport at 3 in the morning. So he's like, yeah, for sure. Yeah, and then like first thing Saturday, we're on a flight down to Texas. So it's like 10 after 3 in the morning. What are we doing right now?
Going to pick up our baby boy and drive him.
Just waiting for somebody to get their life together here. So Thursday, because we're freaking out about this whole thing, Thursday, I think it might have been Thursday morning, I texted Vin because he had asked me to keep him up to date when there was developments on our adoption story. I had to text him and told him what was going on, asked him if he could pray, and I remembered him at some point talking about the fact that he's Vietnamese and his family is connected with the church in the States, and the community is very close together, and they're like a community no matter where they are. They're a community, and asked him, hey, on the off chance, like if there's any possibility that you might know of somebody or even a church in the area down in like Austin area, if you know of anybody or any church that we can contact for like a place to stay, let us know. And right away he wasn't just like, okay, I'll look into it and I'll see if I can get you a church or something. He's like, let me see if I know anybody and I'll get back to you. Then eventually, I think it was Friday morning, he's like, yeah, I got a hold of a contact that I had. This girl I know but I haven't talked to in 17 years. I got a hold of her and she might know somebody, so she's gonna see if she can help out. I'll keep you posted. And then a little while later, he messaged me and said, yeah, here's this person's number. Here's this guy, Duke. Here's his contact info. Get a hold of him and he might be able to help you. So I got a hold of Duke. Duke got a message from a lady named Annie, who was Vin's friend that he hadn't talked to in 17 years. And Annie got a hold of Duke and said that there's a family that is to do with an adoption coming down to Texas, Austin area, asked if he was still in the area. So Duke got a hold of, sent an email to the pastor of the church and Ben, and just asking if they knew anybody, if somebody could help us and help these people out. They're coming down and they need help. And Ben and Jenny, right away, well, Ben said yes, we can help him out. This ties into Ben's story that he told me about this. And that Friday morning, he was doing his devotionals and he was reading in Matthew 25 about helping people, or God's people, and if you help those, then you've helped me, or something along those lines. I can't remember exactly how Ben explained it, but basically he prayed and asked that God would send him people to help. Ben has a servant's heart, and he was asking God to help him in this area of his life and to trust him and to challenge him and ask that God would send him people to help. And a few hours later, I'm on the phone with his wife working out details. Like, it's crazy. We're the people, we just needed a place to stay, and yet Ben and Jenny had prayed about God sending people to them. And we were an answer to prayer for them. And that's just crazy. But Ben just wanted to encourage us and tell us what an answer to prayer we were for him. And that was so awesome to hear, because at that point it was like double confirmation that not only did God work us a place to stay and was providing for like a little while. We didn't know how long. It was just one step ahead. Found us a place to stay, but that we were an answer to prayer for him. And like, it was like, oh, this is bigger than just us. Because at this point we were like seeing things through with blinders on and we weren't sure. And now is all of a sudden like, oh, hey, God definitely has this under control and God has this all planned out. So yeah, we arrive at like close to midnight on Saturday night. The release date of the child we were yet to meet had been pushed back because of some complications. So he was delayed in the hospital, and that gave us enough time to get down there without him having to go into foster care or something. And we arrived, and Ben met us at the airport, and right away, like, I felt bad because we're these strangers that just show up asking for a place to stay. They didn't know us from the next person, and we're just these strangers. So if it was me, I would be unsure about meeting strangers, allowing them to stay in my house. So right away we're like in the vehicle, and he had asked us if we wanted to go to their place for food or go to the hospital. And we're like, well, it's midnight, but if you don't mind, like, we'd love to go to the hospital. And immediately he's like, yep, no problem, we're going. So we all pile into his vehicle and we're driving out to the hospital. And so I wanted to fill him in on this story, because up to now it's just been so crazy, and here are these strangers that were kind enough to open their home to complete strangers and trust them. But he wouldn't even like really let me get started telling them about us. He had to tell us about them and this crazy answer to prayer that we were for them, and this was new to me. And Ben and Jenny were awesome. We were strangers coming to stay with them, and immediately they went out of the way to just welcome us. Like, Jenny made us an incredible meal the night we were arriving. She made us pho, and if you know me, it's like my favorite meal ever. And just coincidentally enough, she asked me if I liked it and if we would eat it if she made it. I was like, absolutely. Like, you don't even know. Like, that's my favorite. Not only do they just welcome us, they're like, well, you can use our other vehicle to go back and forth from the hospital with if you need. We can drive you, or you can borrow our vehicle. So we rolled around in the Jesus Mobile, the Christ Cruiser, this awesome Toyota van that had bumper stickers on it, which just speaks to how awesome Ben is, because that's just how he is. He tells everybody how awesome God is, and that was awesome to see, because that's not me, and Ben is way different than I am, and yet God brought us together to share this part of the story together. Get to the hospital, we meet our son, and right away we know the name that we had picked out, Lucas, that was him, because right away he just like lit up the room. So we met him, got back to Ben and Jenny's. It's like 2 a.m, we're eating and hanging out, and then we go back to the hospital a few hours later. At that point we get to finally hold Lucas and really meet him, and we feed him, and at that point he's sleeping like all the time. So put him down. We went to church with Ben and Jenny, got to experience the Vietnamese Alliance Church in North Austin, and got to meet all the awesome people there and be able to tell the story of how we got to that point. Just that week we got to live life with Ben and Jenny for a short amount of time and get to know them a bit, and learn about their mission and through their church and stuff, and learn their story. Lucas was released from the hospital the following Saturday, and we got to take him back to Ben and Jenny's, and then we booked flights, and the next day after church on the following Sunday, like the very next day after we got out of the hospital, we had flights booked and we were headed to Florida. This lady, Heather, came to meet us. She's the speech therapist at the hospital in Texas, in Round Rock, and part of her job is to make sure that the babies are feeding okay, and she knew about Lucas and knew that we were down from Canada to adopt him and wanted to meet us. We had a possible place to stay in Orlando, but we're still looking, or had some friends that were looking for a place closer to Tampa or the Largo area, which is where our agency was, because we didn't want to be too far away. And she said, well, I might be able to help you out. I'll talk to my husband and see if he knows of anybody. And then checked back with us throughout the week and said that, and told us that her husband was looking because he was a pastor of a church in Austin, and eventually found us a place to stay, because it turns out that her husband went to seminary with, they used to live in Florida, and he went to seminary with a guy who was a pastor of a church in Lakeland. And while it wasn't in Tampa, it was closer than Orlando. And he was gonna see if he could help us. So he sent an email around to people at his church, and this couple, Roger and Nissa Robart, said they could give us a place to stay for a while. And again, didn't know us, but trusted God enough to open their home to us and allow us to stay with them and their two young girls, and helped us out with a place to stay for me for a couple weeks, and for Sandy for like a month, until it was time to come back to Canada once all the paperwork and stuff was done. So yeah, that was just crazy. Lucas came home the 24th of August. Yeah, 24th of August, came back. Sandy and Lucas came back to Canada, because I had to come back earlier just due to the fact that I was out of vacation time.
Yeah.
So you and I and Sandy's parents had come to visit, because they were secretly hoping that Sandy would be able to come back to Canada while they were out visiting, and we knew ahead of time, a couple days ahead, that all the paperwork was finally coming through, and we're able to get a passport, and we're just waiting for like everything to arrive. And Sandy had booked a flight, but we didn't tell her parents until that day that she was getting on a plane.
So you kind of surprised them.
I kind of surprised them a little bit, but it's kind of tough to go from Lloyd to the airport in Edmonton without really, like at that point, there's no more secret. Like, we're going to Edmonton. Why are we going to Edmonton? Well, so we just told them in the morning, and Sandy's on a plane, and Lucas is on the plane too, and they're coming home, and you're gonna meet your grandchild. So I asked you if you wanted to tag along and come meet Lucas, because
and you know, knowing me, I was just all over that.
Yeah, so we wanted some pictures and stuff of the arrival, and so yeah, you came with us, and a stormy prairie night.
Yeah.
They arrived home, and yeah, Lucas was home, and things were awesome. Immediately, like, taking him to church and meeting people. Just who Lucas is was just, like, it's just so crazy how blessed we are. How God blessed us with Lucas. Just who he is. He really is a light, and that's what his name means, is a light. And he's a light in our lives. He's been and has always been awesome, and yeah, just how cool he is. He's always smiling and always happy. Even when he's sick, he's still happy. And how God has just blessed us with such a cool kid. And then getting to introduce our church family and our immediate families and extended families to this cool kid, Lucas, and how he lights up a room when he goes in and how he loves everybody. It's crazy. I don't think he's ever not smiled at somebody. Yeah. And just getting to know him and his personality, and yeah, how he's just blessed us so much in our lives, and yeah, just how good God has been to us through the whole thing, and the crazy winding road that is the journey of adoption, and how ultimately Lucas was the child that God had in mind for us the entire time, but yeah, I don't ever do things the easy way. Through my own ignorance and stupidity and trying to control things, and how God had a plan for us the whole time, and he just needed us to realize the fact that he did, and to accept that, and to just let God be in charge, and to live out the things that I had been praying about and asking God for, and to develop my relationship with God. And it was all set in motion by the desire to become parents and to adopt a child. And ultimately, Lucas was where that journey led us. And we don't know the rest of Lucas's story at this point, obviously, but up until now, it's been like so incredible.
Thank you, Cedric, for sharing this amazing story of Lucas. And I guess this is where this video ends, but
Yes.
It's not where the story ends.
No.
God is always continually working in everyone's lives, and he will continue to work in Cedric's life and Sandy's life, and also in Lucas's life. And the people connected in this story will always remember what happened here, and they will be encouraged and uplifted by it. And that is my hope and my prayer is that you would be encouraged and uplifted by this story as well. This amazing and spectacular journey. God be with you.